When Camila sees the photo, she asks, "Excuse me, who is this woman?" Without looking, he replies, "The love of my life. I never told her that," but as it turned out, the waitress recognized the woman in the photo. In the sleepy, provincial town of Midway, Georgia, where the days passed with the slow hum of cicadas and the faded neon of rundown establishments told tales of better times long past, 26-year-old Camila Grayson served as a waitress at Grayson's Diner, a once proud roadside cafe now gradually succumbing to disrepair and the relentless march of time. Each morning, as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Camila arrived in her worn uniform, careful not to disturb the quiet routine that had sustained her through years of struggle. Her life was modest, defined by long shifts behind creaking counter stools, endless pots of coffee, and orders shouted in haste by regulars who, like her, fought to make ends meet. Yet amid the clatter of plates and the buzz of low conversation, there was one treasure Camila clutched to her heart with fierce tenderness. An old, faded photograph of her mother, a deceased housekeeper whom Camila remembered only in fleeting glances of childhood. Though those memories were hazy, the photograph, once framed on a small bedside table, remained a sacred relic, a silent testament to love and sacrifice that anchored her identity even when everything else felt transient. On an ordinary, sweltering afternoon, as the heat shimmered over cracked pavements and the radio in the diner played old country ballads, Camila moved with the practiced grace of someone used to unnoticed existence. The bell above the door jingled with a peculiar ring that day, announcing the arrival of an unexpected patron. In walked a man whose presence was quietly magnetic despite his determined effort to remain incognito. Clad in a simple, dark jacket and a pair of well-worn boots, he carried an air of mystery that contrasted sharply with the dusty familiarity of the diner. His eyes, hidden behind inexpensive sunglasses despite the overcast light filtering through the windows, scanned the room with a measured calm. He made his way to a corner booth and sat down with quiet dignity, as though he were steering through life's labyrinth without leaving traces of his true identity. Camila, ever diligent, approached the booth to take his order. Her polite smile flickered uncertainly as she noted the man's sparse, yet refined attire, a stark contrast to the faded diner decor and the patrons who were regular fixtures of the town's slow rhythms. As she placed his order, her eyes caught the glimpse of a leather wallet peeking out of his jacket pocket. It seemed oddly out of place for someone traveling anonymously. With a practiced mind used to the mundane details of daily service, she continued her work, but an inexplicable tug of curiosity stayed with her long after she had refilled coffee cups and cleared away chipped plates. A little later, as fate would have it, the man stood to leave. In his haste, a slip of his wrist sent his wallet tumbling onto the scuffed floor near the entrance. Instinctively, Camila rushed to retrieve it. Balancing the worn leather in her hands, she couldn't help but glance at its contents, driven by a curiosity that bordered on trepidation. Amid an assortment of credit cards and faded receipts, her eyes fixed on a small photograph nestled at the very top, a photograph of a gentle, smiling woman with soft eyes and a kind expression. In that instant, Camila's heart pounded against her ribs, as if trying to escape the sudden overload of emotion. The face in the picture struck her with an almost unbearable familiarity. It was unmistakably the same image, the same treasured relic, that had adorned her bedside for as long as she could remember. Before she could collect her swirling thoughts, the man returned, searching for his lost wallet. Camila, her voice trembling yet resolute, handed it back to him. In that split second of charged silence, she blurted out, "Excuse me? Who is this woman?" Her words hung awkwardly between them, fragile as glass, as she pointed discreetly to the photograph still protruding from his wallet. The man paused, his eyes hidden behind dark lenses. Without even glancing directly at her, he replied in a low, almost wistful tone, "The love of my life. I never told her that." His words trailed off into silence, as if he were both relishing and lamenting a secret that had haunted him for years. Stunned, Camila's mind reeled. This improbable statement forced her to confront a mystery she had never expected to face. How could this stranger, the enigmatic billionaire, as she would later learn his name was Harold Montgomery, possess a photograph identical to the one she had so carefully preserved? The question pierced through her practicality and stirred memories of whispered bedtime stories and half-remembered lullabies about her mother's gentle hands and kind smile. Camilla's pulse raced as she clutched the wallet, where destiny now seemed to have placed the key to a past shrouded in silence. For a long moment, neither spoke. In the muted clatter of the diner, with other customers oblivious to the silent drama unfolding at the counter, Camila felt as if time itself had slowed. The routine cadence of her days, the endless orders, the modest paychecks, the invisible burden of unresolved longing, had suddenly been ruptured by a force both unexpected and painfully intimate. Here was a man whose mere possession of a cherished photograph unraveled everything she thought she knew about her own beginnings. The realization mingled with shock and an unfamiliar hope, as if the universe had conspired to offer her a second chance at understanding her own story. Even as Harold Montgomery gathered his wallet and prepared to leave, the weight of his softly spoken words lingered in the air. Camila, still absorbing the impact of that brief exchange, felt both shaken and inexplicably compelled to seek the truth. What was the connection between this mysterious man and the image of her mother, the woman she had clung to in memory, despite the hazy recollections of her childhood? Unbeknownst to her, the simple act of picking up a forgotten wallet had now set her on a path that would dredge up a forgotten history, a tale of love, sacrifice, and bitter family secrets that had long been buried by decades of silence. As the door closed behind Harold, leaving behind only the fading scent of expensive cologne and a hint of regret, Camila stood still amid the din of Grayson's diner. The photograph crinkled softly in her trembling hand, a tangible link to a past she had barely known but always felt. In that charged moment, with questions blooming in her heart like wildflowers in the spring, she realized that nothing would be the same again. Her life, her very identity, was now intertwined with secrets and revelations waiting to be uncovered. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between memory and destiny, the truth was stirring, promising not only to answer the question of who her mother truly was, but also to rewrite the legacy of love and loss that had haunted her all her life. In the moments after the fateful encounter at Grayson's diner, Camila Grayson's world seemed to tilt on its axis. The image of that mysterious photograph, identical in every way to the cherished one she'd long safeguarded, haunted her thoughts with an intensity that left her breathless. With Harold Montgomery's whispered words still echoing in her ears, "The love of my life. I never told her." Camila felt as if a veil had been lifted on a part of her past she'd never truly questioned. Standing behind the counter in the near-empty diner, she clutched the wallet as if it were a fragile lifeline. The worn leather, the creased edges, and that singular picture of a gentle, smiling woman stirred something deep within her. Memories that had been locked away behind silence and survival. As she carefully returned to her duties, every movement felt heavy with introspection. The clatter of plates, the low hum of the radio playing vintage country tunes, and even the murmurs of regular customers. All of it blurred into a backdrop against which a storm of questions raged. Who was that woman in the photograph? How could it be that the same face, so intimately familiar from her childhood, appeared in the wallet of a wealthy stranger? Camilla's mind raced, sometimes in fleeting moments of clarity and sometimes in spirals of doubt. All her life, she had leaned on that single snapshot of her mother, a relic from a time she barely remembered, yet which had always been a source of quiet comfort. Now, seeing it again in such an unexpected context, left her both disoriented and compelled to search for answers. During a brief lull in the busy afternoon rush, Camila retreated to a small storage closet at the back of the diner, a quiet, temperature-controlled space where she often sought refuge to catch her breath. There, in the stillness punctuated by the distant beep of the cash register and the muted conversation of a coworker in the kitchen, she allowed herself a moment to process. Sitting on a creaky metal chair with the wallet resting on her lap, her eyes wandered over the edges of the photograph. The sharp features and serene eyes of the woman seemed to speak directly to her soul, whispering forgotten stories of love, sacrifice, and loss. For the first time, Camila found herself questioning the fragments of her own story. A tidal wave of childhood recollections began to crash over her, a hazy montage of mornings when her mother, Naomi, would hum softly in the kitchen. Gentle hands that once brushed her hair, and a voice that, even though distant and seldom heard, always provided a warmth she could not quite articulate. Although memories of her mother were few and blurred by time, that singular, faded image had been a beacon of identity and yearning throughout her life. Now, confronted with the revelation that this very image was linked to Harold Montgomery, an enigmatic figure whose life she had never imagined intersecting with her own, Camilla's heart pounded with a mix of trepidation and hope. Her mind wandered to the possibility that there was more to her mother's past than the few familiar details gleaned from whispered family stories. Questions began to take shape. Did her mother once know a man of grand means? Had she experienced a love so deep that it could transcend the hardship of her own humble beginnings? And why had that truth been kept hidden from Camilla all these years? Each question pulsed with the promise of uncovering secrets that might redefine everything Camilla thought she knew about her origins. Outside, the late Georgian afternoon cast long shadows through the dusty windows of Grayson's diner, and the outside world seemed to glow with the melancholic hues of impending change. Camilla's thoughts grew louder against the backdrop of routine. The quiet clink of silverware, the steady murmur of casual conversation, and the persistent whir of an old ceiling fan. All of these became the score to the internal drama unfolding within her. She could feel tears prickling at the edge of her resolve, not solely from the pain of long-held loneliness, but from the stirring realization that her life might hold a key to answers long obscured by silence. Unable to shake the intensity of the moment, Camilla resolved that she must embark on a personal quest for the truth. Her curiosity was no longer a benign trait. It had transformed into a desperate need to understand the mystery of her mother's past and how it might connect her to this unexpected stranger. With her senses sharpened by emotion, she began to compile questions in her mind and plan subtle inquiries she might later pose to anyone who could shed light on the matter. Perhaps there were family relics stowed away in a dusty trunk, or a faded letter tucked away in a forgotten drawer, waiting patiently for someone brave enough to look. That evening, after a long shift spent juggling coffee cups and orders with forced smiles, Camilla closed the diner's door behind her and stepped into the warm, humid twilight of the small town. The cool night air did little to calm her turbulent thoughts. On her way home, every familiar corner of Midway seemed to whisper fragments of the past. Every street lamp, every old storefront, reverberated with a promise that the answer lay hidden somewhere in the interstices of memory and time. And as she walked the quiet sidewalks, the photograph pressed against her chest in her bag, Camilla felt an undeniable certainty. The life she had known would never be the same again. After that fateful afternoon at Grayson's diner, Camilla found herself unable to shake the echo of Harold Montgomery's whispered words and the inexplicable connection to the faded photograph of her mother. The diner's clamor had long since quieted as dusk settled over Midway, and in the fragile twilight of her small apartment, memories and questions collided. That night, sleep eluded her as she cradled the leather wallet in trembling hands. Every detail of that mysterious image, the soft, kind eyes of the woman who had once been the center of her scant childhood recollections, promised answers to secrets buried in the folds of time. With a heavy heart driven by desperate hope, Camilla decided that it was time to seek guidance from the one person who might know the true story of her mother, her grandmother. The following morning, Camilla gathered her few belongings and set out for the modest, weathered house on the outskirts of town, a sanctuary where her grandmother, Eleanor Nana Grayson, had quietly preserved decades of family lore. The narrow dirt road leading to Nana's house twisted through fields of golden corn and clusters of time-worn cottages. Despite the lingering weariness of her daily routine at the diner, Camilla's steps quickened as anticipation mingled with trepidation. She wasn't sure what she might uncover, but she could feel deep in her soul that the truth about her mother, a truth perhaps whispering of love, sacrifice, even the bitter sting of broken barriers, lay hidden within those creaking walls. When the old wooden door creaked open, Camilla was greeted by the familiar scent of lavender and aged paper. Nana Eleanor, although advanced in years, still carried a spark of the resilience and kindness that had once defined her daughter's life. With gentle eyes that had weathered decades of hardship, Nana embraced Camila as though to bridge the gap of unread stories. "My dear, it's been too long," she murmured, her voice soft like the rustle of faded lace. Camila, on the verge of tears, clutched her mother's photograph and whispered, "Nana, I found something. A photo that looks exactly like Mum's. I need to know. Who was she really?" They settled in the cozy parlor, where beams of morning sun filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate, shifting patterns onto a pile of old trunks and boxes. Over steaming cups of tea, Nana Eleanor's eyes clouded with melancholy as she regarded the worn photograph now clutched in Camilla's hands. "Your mother was a remarkable woman," Nana said slowly, her gaze fixed on the cherished image. "She worked with all her heart, not just as a housekeeper in our home, but as a woman who loved deeply in a world that wasn't always kind to her." After a pause heavy with unspoken memories, Nana reached for a battered, wooden box that had long sat forgotten on the mantelpiece. "I kept letters and mementos from those days," she explained softly as she unlocked the box. "They hold the pieces of the story that we were never meant to forget." With deliberate care, she unfolded a yellowed envelope sealed with frayed blue tape. Inside lay a letter written in spidery, looping handwriting. A letter from years ago addressed to a woman whose name glowed on the envelope in faded ink. As Camilla's eyes scanned the delicate lines, she began to piece together stunning fragments of her mother's life. A passionate romance overshadowed by immense sacrifice, struggles against societal prejudices, and the impossible choices forced upon her by a world plagued with racial barriers and family scandal. "Your mother?" Nana began, her voice trembling slightly. "She fell in love, deeply, with a man from a different world, a man whose heart was as large as his fortune. Their love was a secret, hidden from view because society wasn't yet ready for it. They were forced apart by forces beyond their control. I always knew that secret love came with a heavy cost, and I begged them both to keep their hearts safe." Camilla's mind reeled. The photograph, the lettering in the faded correspondence, and the painful glimmers of recollection swirling within her began to create a mosaic of forgotten intimacy that her mother had once known. As Nana recounted fragmentary memories of hushed voices and stolen moments in a country divided by prejudice, Camila learned that her mother's love story was not one of ordinary affection. It was a battle fought in silence, wrought with personal sacrifice. Her mother had chosen to leave behind the love that could have promised a brighter future, a love that had been deemed too dangerous by families and society alike. Between sips of tea in the gentle afternoon light, the two women pored over more letters and photographs, scraps of a history that had been concealed out of fear and scandal in the turbulent 1990s. One particular letter spoke of promises made under starlit skies, then broken by bitter obligations and harsh parental disapproval. Nana's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she recalled the pain of a love unfulfilled, and Camila felt the sting of her own longing for a mother whose full story had been locked away in secrecy. It was as if each word on those fragile pages trembled with the residue of a past that screamed to be recognized. The conversation drifted into a quiet reverence for lost hopes and the relentless power of memory. Nana explained how her daughter, the mother Camila had known only in fragments, had once faced impossible choices, and how her silence had been a survival skill in a world that demanded conformity. "She never got the chance to tell you everything, my dear," Nana whispered. "There was love, and there was pain, and in that pain lay a sacrifice that changed the course of our lives." As the afternoon waned and shadows lengthened in the old house, Camila sat in thoughtful silence, absorbing every confession and every faded word. The mystery was unraveling slowly, weaving together threads of love, sacrifice, and the unyielding struggle against the weight of a society's expectations. A fire of determination kindled deep within her. This quest for truth was not just about understanding her mother's past, but reclaiming her own future. In that quiet, sunlit room filled with the scent of memories and old paper, Camila vowed to continue her search for answers, letting the voices of the past guide her steps forward. In the weeks following her visit to her grandmother's humble house, where fragile letters and faded photographs began to piece together long-forgotten fragments of her mother's past, Camila found herself increasingly unable to quell the gnawing mystery. the treasured image of her mother. A woman whose gentle smile had always been her solitary source of comfort, had resurfaced under the most bewildering circumstances at Grayson's diner. That incident, set off by a chance encounter with the enigmatic millionaire, Harold Montgomery, had left Camila, and her quiet heart, drenched in questions. Who was this man whose lost wallet contained a photo so identical to the one she had cherished all her life? And how could he refer to that image as the love of my life? Unable to surmount the dissonance between the woman in the photograph and her own fragmented memories of her mother, Camila resolved to seek answers beyond the familiar confines of her small town. Amid the bittersweet recollections recounted by her grandmother Eleanor, the kernel of truth that emerged pointed toward a past filled with passion, prejudice, and painful sacrifice. With each whispered detail, Camila began to suspect that her mother's story was intertwined with a secret world far removed from the modest life she had known. A hidden chapter all too familiar to those burdened by high society expectations and unyielding family honor. One dusky evening, as the humid Georgian twilight embraced midway, Camila hesitantly dialed the number scribbled on the back of one of her grandmother's yellowed letters. The call, made with shaking fingers and an anxious heart, was answered by none other than Harold Montgomery himself. Though he had tried to remain incognito in the faded walls of Grayson's diner, fate had other plans. With gentle formality, Harold invited her to meet in a quiet lounge at an upscale hotel on the outskirts of town, a neutral space where burdens and secrets might finally be shared away from prying eyes. Under the soft luminescence of scattered lamps in a secluded corner of the lounge, Camila and Harold sat facing each other across a small marble table. The ambient murmur of discreet conversations faded into a hushed intimacy, as if the world had momentarily stilled to bear witness to the conversation that was about to unfold. Camilla's heart pounded with both trepidation and an unspoken anticipation, while Harold's carefully guarded eyes betrayed a storm of emotion that had long been suppressed beneath layers of duty, regret, and unresolved yearning. After an awkward pause, Harold leaned forward and, in a soft, measured tone, broke the silence. "Camila," he began, his voice trembling as if each word was weighed down by decades of unspoken truth. "I owe you an explanation, a confession that is as painful as it is necessary." He paused to take a deep breath, his gaze shifting momentarily downward as if gathering the courage to confront a past he had long hidden. "That photograph you saw, it is not just a picture to me. It is the image of the love of my life, the woman who meant everything to me." His voice, husky with reverence and sorrow, resonated in the small space. The air between them was thick with expectation. Camilla's eyes, wide with disbelief and a flicker of hurt, silently pleaded for him to continue. Harold's next words, delivered with a tender vulnerability that softened the edges of his previous reticence, shattered the quiet. "Your mother, Camila, she was the one I loved with every fiber of my being. I never had the courage, or perhaps the chance, to tell her the truth before circumstances forced us apart. Society, the weight of family expectations, and a scandal that erupted in the turbulent 1990s. They all conspired to keep our love a secret." He looked directly into her eyes then, his voice steadier now as the revelation poured forth. "I was young, and I was caught in a maelstrom where love was deemed too dangerous. A love that dared to cross boundaries of race and class that our world would never allow. Your mother was extraordinary in every way, and the time we shared was the most beautiful, yet agonizing, chapter of my life. I kept that photograph with me always, a silent reminder of what we lost, and of the life that might have been." His admission hung in the air like fragile glass, each word reverberating with the weight of decades. Camila felt the ground shift beneath her. The revelation was overwhelming, a cascade of emotions that ranged from disbelief to profound sorrow. Each detail of Harold's confession painted a picture of her mother she had never imagined. A woman who had once shared a forbidden, passionate love that defied the constraints of her modest existence, intertwined with a man whose own life had been irrevocably altered by circumstance and sacrifice. "So, you never told her?" Camila managed to whisper, her voice wavering with a mixture of yearning and resentment. as if the very idea of their lost love both broke and bound her in its spell. Harold's eyes softened with regret. I wanted to, every day I longed to tell her the truth, to claim the right to love her openly, and maybe, just maybe, build a future together. But I was forced to make choices that tore us apart. And then everything changed, and I lost her. His words carried a palpable ache, one that seemed to echo the loneliness that had shadowed his every step since that fateful loss. I never expected to see you, Camila, but when I saw your face today, there was something about you, an unmistakable resemblance to her, that stirred memories I had long tried to bury. The revelation crashed over Camila in waves. The figure of her mother, so elusive yet ever-present in her heart, took on a new dimension of meaning, one that intertwined with scandalous secrecy, societal constraints, and the unyielding pain of a love that was never meant to be. In that delicate exchange, the secrets of the Montgomery family began to unravel. Harold spoke of the scandal, of how his family's status and the rigid expectations of upper society rendered his connection to her an unbearable risk. They said our differences were insurmountable, he murmured. They said I could never let such a love threaten the legacy we had built. As his confession unfolded, Harold's guarded composure gave way to heartfelt vulnerability. He admitted that his own life had been forever altered by that forbidden romance. Every choice I made since then, every piece of wealth I accumulated, was haunted by the memory of what we lost, he confessed. I lived with the regret of never being able to embrace her fully, the regret of a love doomed by fate and a world unwilling to accept it. In that quiet, dimly lit corner of the lounge, the truth hung between them, binding their fates in ways neither had anticipated. Camilla's mind raced with emotions. Anger at the injustice that had torn her mother and Harold apart, sorrow for the sacrifices forced upon them by a cruel society, and a stirring hope that perhaps this confession could lead to the redemption of a family's shattered legacy. Even as her eyes glistened with unshed tears, she sensed that this was only the beginning of an even larger story that spanned generations. A story of forbidden love, deep-seated regrets, and the relentless pursuit of honor that challenged the very foundations of the world they inhabited. The confession hung in the air like shattered glass as Harold's tender words faded into silence. For Camila, who had spent an entire life piecing together the bittersweet fragments of her mother's memory, the revelation was a searing, unexpected betrayal. In that hushed lounge corner, where soft lamplight and whispered truths had embraced them, her heart thundered with a tumult of emotions. Disbelief, anger, and an all-encompassing sorrow. For several long, agonizing moments, Camila stared at Harold as if trying to extract meaning from his every syllable. His confession that her mother, whose gentle smile had been Camila's only solace in the blurred recollections of childhood, was the love of his life, was a truth that she could neither comprehend nor accept immediately. How could it be that the tender, quiet woman whose faded photograph she'd sheltered so carefully, the woman whose memory was the only connection to the mother she almost never knew, had once been claimed by a clandestine romance marked by scandal and sacrifice? To Camila, the answer was not so simple or even beautiful. Instead, her mind felt assaulted by the weight of a secret life that she never knew existed. A secret which now transformed every cherished memory into something tainted by regret and mystery. Her eyes flared with a mixture of anger and incredulity as tears began to well. "How can this be?" she finally managed to say, her voice trembling with a rush of emotions too raw to be contained. "All my life, I clung to that photograph, to the idea of a gentle mother who was my sanctuary. And now you say she was involved in a love so forbidden, so complicated that no one could ever speak of it? How do you expect me to accept that?" Her words were halting and uneven, heavy with the pain of a child who had only known absence and solitude in her mother's place. Harold leaned back, his face etched with regret and sorrow as he watched Camila unravel before him. I know this hurts you," he murmured, his tone soft and apologetic. "I never meant for you to find out this way. I have carried the weight of not only my love for her but also the guilt of never being able to share our truth. I understand if you're angry, if you want to reject everything I've said. I only wish I could have changed the past, to have allowed her the happiness we were denied." His eyes pleaded for understanding, yet they lacked the power to soften the blow of his revelation. Camila's inner turmoil swirled. Memories of her childhood. A sparse collection of faded moments when a soft lullaby or a tender gesture had just almost, made her feel loved, now collided violently with Harold's words. Every recollection, every broken piece of her identity that she had clung to in desperate solitude, was now reinterpreted through the lens of a secret romance. The idealized vision of a loving, albeit absent, mother crumbled, replaced by a complex tapestry of passion, social constraints, and heart-wrenching sacrifice. It was as if every well-kept secret, every hidden letter from the past that Nana had guarded so fiercely, had exploded into a torrent of truth that threatened to drown her. Why? Camila's voice, barely a whisper at first, then louder with each passing second, finally broke out into a cry of anguish. Why did you keep this from me? Why couldn't you tell me? Because I deserved to know who she really was. I deserved a mother who was honest with me, even if her truth was painful. The words spilled out in an uncontrolled rush, each syllable fueled by betrayal and hurt. It wasn't merely the revelation of forbidden romance that unsettled her. It was the abandonment of trust, the loss of an identity that had been built on the fragments of a past she thought she understood. Harold reached out, his hand trembling as if hoping to bridge the chasm that had suddenly yawned between them. Camila, please, he began, but she recoiled, her eyes darting away in silent protest. In that instant, every whisper of hope turned to shards of bitter defiance. I can't believe this, she said bitterly, her voice cracking as she pushed herself away from him. I don't want to know more. I can't make sense of a story that twists everything I thought I knew about my own life. Her hands clenched into fists, and she stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the polished floor beneath the weight of her abrupt exit. The minutes that followed felt interminable. Harold sat back in the dim glow of the lounge, his words fading into the silence that now seemed to swallow him. Camila, with ragged breaths and a heart aching from too many years of unanswered questions, strode briskly out of the lounge. Outside, the cool night air met her like a jolt of reality. Each step away from that painful encounter both a rejection of the new, unwelcome truth and an escape from the turbulent storm within. She barely heard the murmurs of the few onlookers as she passed, her eyes fixed straight ahead as if hoping the darkened streets could somehow erase the memory of that confession. In the solitude of the night, every step away from that upscale lounge felt like a silent retreat into herself. A retreat precipitated by a heart too heavy to bear the burden of hidden legacies and unspoken apologies. The streets that had once promised a quiet refuge now seemed alien, filled with the echoes of promises never fulfilled and whispers of a past that would never let her go. Alone, beneath the vast, indifferent sky, Camila's tears mingled with the cool drizzle of a reluctant autumn. The journey ahead was no longer just about discovering the truth. It was an arduous, personal battle to reconcile a shattered identity with a past that revealed more than she had ever wished to know. That night, as she trudged down empty sidewalks and under flickering streetlights, Camila realized that her path forward was now obscured by doubts and deep wounds. The pain of her mother's unrevealed secrets tightened around her like a vice, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly lost, an orphan not only of memory but of the truth. The bitter taste of betrayal and the echo of unanswered whys saturated every step, leaving her to wonder if it was possible ever to forgive, or even to understand, the complexities of a past that had been hidden too long. In the days following that bitter confrontation with Harold, Camila wandered the quiet streets of Midway as if searching for an anchor amid a storm of emotions. Every step she took was burdened by conflicting feelings: anger, betrayal, and a deep, aching sorrow that threatened to swallow her whole. That night, when the cool drizzle mingled with her tears along dimly lit sidewalks, she felt utterly alone and overwhelmed by the weight of a hidden past now thrust violently into her present. Yet, even in that dark solitude, faint echoes of her mother's gentle presence, whispered in half-forgotten lullabies and the loving glances preserved in an old, cherished photograph, began to stir a flicker of possibility. The very next morning, Camila found rare solace in the warm, familiar atmosphere of a local coffee shop that had long served as a refuge for the town's dreamers. Slumped in a corner with her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, she stared out the rain-streaked window, lost in thought and heartache. It wasn't long before her solitude was gently interrupted by the arrival of an old friend, Lydia, a spirited woman who had known Camila even before the diner became her daily stage. Lydia's warm smile and compassionate eyes cut through the haze of Camila's despair. "I heard what happened," Lydia said softly as she sat down across from her. "I know your heart must be torn apart, but listen. I've always believed that our past, painful though it is, holds the keys to our true identity. Your mother was a radiant soul, and what Harold told you may be broken and complicated, but it doesn't diminish her love for you." Lydia's words, spoken with a sincerity earned through years of shared confessions and gentle encouragement, began to bring Camila back from the brink. As the morning unfolded, they talked quietly over mismatched teacups and the soft hum of a jazz record. Lydia recalled small, almost forgotten moments from Camila's childhood, stories that Nana had once shared about how full of hope and kindness her mother had been. "I remember how your mother would sing to you," Lydia whispered, her voice both tender and resolute. "She always said that love was a bridge over any sorrow. Even if circumstances forced her to sacrifice parts of herself, her love for you was never a secret. It was a flame meant to endure, even through the darkest nights." Motivated by these recollections, Camila began to rummage through the few remaining mementos that she'd kept over the years. In a small wooden chest hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her modest apartment, she discovered a bundle of letters and personal notes that her mother had written but never sent. A collection of words that mixed dreams with heartache, hope with resignation. Each delicate, yellowed page sang of a love that was both desperate and defiant. A love that, even in the face of oppressive societal norms and the harsh judgment of a divided world, had burned fiercely in secret. As she read the words, Camila felt as if she were holding fragments of a long-lost embrace, a lingering echo of a mother's unconditional devotion that no betrayal or hidden scandal could ever erase. At the diner, murmurs of sympathy and kindness from regular customers and coworkers soon wove into Camila's daily routine. Her longtime colleague, Trevor, a gentle soul with thoughtful eyes, stopped by with a word of encouragement, asking, "How are you holding up, Camila?" His quiet concern, along with the friendly banter of the other waitstaff, reminded her that even when the truth cuts deep, the bonds of community can help mend even the most fractured heart. Their kindness slowly replaced the bitterness that had clouded her spirit in recent days. Buoyed by her friend's compassion and the poignant fragments of her mother's past, Camila began to reframe the turmoil that had erupted within her. Although Harold's raw confession had shattered the only picture she had of her mother, it also opened a door to a more profound legacy. A legacy defined by forbidden love, great sacrifice, and the courage to endure despite insurmountable odds. As the memories of her mother's soft laughter and the glow of her warm presence pulsed gently within her, Camila realized that the secret history was not meant to break her, but to build her. A mosaic of pain and beauty that would help her craft a future infused with both forgiveness and strength. Late one evening, as she sat in her cramped living room surrounded by the relics of a past both painful and precious, Camila pulled her mother's photograph from its hiding place and stared at it for what felt like an eternity. The image was no longer just a reminder of loss and unanswered questions. It had transformed into a beacon, guiding her onward even when the path ahead was shrouded in darkness. In that quiet moment of connection, she understood that the legacy of her mother was deeply interwoven with her own destiny, and that every whispered secret, every shadowed hint of love and sacrifice, ultimately held the promise of healing. As the days turned into weeks, Camila resolved to let the pain of betrayal be tempered by the warmth of remembrance and the unwavering support of those who cared for her. Instead of turning away from the story that had haunted her, she began to embrace it, allowing each tear, each memory, to be transformed into an offering of strength. In the comforting voices of her friends and in the silent encouragement of her mother's words, Camila discovered that sometimes the most transformative journey begins not with a sudden revelation, but with a slow, courageous step toward forgiveness and understanding. The winter sky loomed low over the centuries-old cemetery on the outskirts of Midway, where time seemed suspended beneath heavy, gray clouds. Amid the quiet rustle of bare branches and the gentle whisper of a chilly breeze, Camila Grayson found herself standing before a modest, time-worn headstone. It was the resting place of her mother, the woman whose faded photograph had been her sole, treasured link to a past filled with both love and mystery. In that solemn moment, surrounded by the silent echoes of lost memories and unsaid goodbyes, Camilla's heart thumped with the mingled resonance of grief and an unyielding hope for answers. For years, she had searched for the truth about her mother. A truth hidden beneath layers of painful secrecy, family scandals, and societal constraints dating back to an era when differences were considered a threat. The discovery of that familiar photograph in the wallet of a stranger had shattered her sense of complacency and set her on a journey, one that had led her from the faded neon lights of Grayson's diner to the intimate confidences shared with her grandmother, and finally to this quiet, sacred ground. Just as Camila reached out to gently trace the engraved letters on the stone, her fingertips lingering as though trying to feel the former warmth of a mother's embrace, a familiar presence emerged from behind a row of ancient oaks. Harold Montgomery, the enigmatic man whose lost wallet had ignited this relentless quest for truth, approached with slow, measured steps. His posture, straightened by years of military discipline yet now softened by undeniable regret and tender affection, belied the formidable persona he had long maintained. Standing a few paces away, Harold's eyes, so frequently hidden behind dark sunglasses, watched Camila with a sorrowful intensity. In the quiet stillness of the cemetery, the only sound was the soft scuffle of their footsteps upon the gravel and the distant murmur of a church bell striking the hour. Finally, with the raw vulnerability of a man unburdening decades of secret pain, Harold cleared his throat. His voice, low and choked with emotion, broke the silence. "Camila?" he began, hesitating as if the very sound of her name carried the weight of history. Then, with a trembling resolve, he continued, "I never stopped loving her. I have carried her memory in my heart every day, and in that silent photograph, I have found solace in the love that once defined my world." Camilla's pulse quickened, her eyes wide as they searched his face. The truth that had so long hovered at the edge of her dreams was now unfolding before her. Harold took a step closer, the chill of the winter air unable to cool the fire of his confession. "I must tell you what I have kept hidden for too long," he said. His tone shifted as he drew in a shaky breath. "I am not merely the man who loved your mother. I have always been your father. I never had the chance to tell you, to explain how forces beyond our control, the pressure of my family, and a scandal that tore us apart in the turbulent 90s, forced me to live in endless silence." For a long, timeless moment, the world held its breath. Camila felt her heart shatter and then begin to mend all at once. Shock, betrayal, and an unexpected tenderness mingled in her eyes as she faced the man who now claimed her as his own. The revelation was overwhelming, a cascade of emotions that transformed the very fabric of the life she had known. The bitter solitude of her past, the unspoken questions that had haunted her youth, all now converged into a single, crystalline truth. Tears welled in Camilla's eyes, not solely from the sting of betrayal, but from the overwhelming release of answers that she had craved her entire life. In a voice that wavered between disbelief and quiet awe, she whispered, You're my father?" The words, fragile and tentative, barely rose above the whispering wind that rustled through the cemetery. Harold's eyes softened as he reached out slowly, not to force her embrace but to offer a gesture of reconciliation. "Yes, Camila," he said gently, his voice imbued with remorse and hope. "I have lived in torment for not being able to hold you close, for never speaking the truth that ties us together. I know nothing can erase the years of silence, the distance that you had to endure. But I promise you now that I will never hide again. I will speak, I will act, and I will stand by you as your father, so that the legacy of my love for your mother is honored and our story can finally have its voice." The words, simple yet profound, echoed in the cold air as Camilla's breaths came in heavy, shuddering gasps. The silent grave, witness to a past filled with lost love and whispered confessions, now bore the promise of mended hearts. Slowly, as if drawn by an invisible thread of destiny, Camila stepped closer to Harold. In that moment of shared vulnerability beneath the watchful gaze of her mother's final resting place, anger and sorrow transformed into a tentative forgiveness. The harshness of years gone by, the cruelty of secrets, and the relentless pursuit for truth all receded into a delicate understanding, one that offered the possibility of healing. Harold's hand, steady and warm, rested gently on her shoulder. "I am so sorry for all the years of silence and pain," he murmured. "I can no longer live with the burden of secrets. I want to be here for you now, truly present and forever honest." His words seemed to wash over Camila like a cleansing tide. Slowly, her tears began to flow, a flowing mix that were not merely of sorrow, but of relief and the miraculous power of forgiveness. In those tears was the recognition that the truth, however painful, set her free. Standing together by her mother's grave, amid the soft rustling of autumn leaves and the murmurs of a quiet congregation of memories, Harold repeated once more with quiet determination, "Camila, my daughter, I promise, from this day forward, I will never remain silent again." His final vow was an unspoken pledge to honor the love that had long since shaped both their lives. A promise to let truth be the light by which they would both find a path to healing and belonging. In that embrace of reconciliation, as the first gentle rays of a new dawn broke through the gray, Camila felt the fierce weight of a lifelong search begin to lift. Her tears, glistening in the soft light, were not born of lingering pain but of unexpected forgiveness. A profound acceptance that love, though concealed for years in silence, would forever endure. She spent her life searching for answers. But when she learned the truth, her tears were not of pain but of unexpected forgiveness. Subscribe if you believe that love never dies, even after years of silence.